Great. Well, yeah, it's good to be here. It's a bit of a funny talk. It was supposed to be scheduled for Sunday because Sunday is the privacy talk, or the privacy track, let's say. So it's a bit of an awkward one in the middle of a DeFi day. But to introduce myself, my name is Jaya, Klara, Brekke. I'm part of the NIM team. And effectively, my background, I come to events like this, and sometimes I'm speaking as a member of the NIM team, and other times I get invited because I also have somewhat of a background in the social sciences, and events like these like to have a little bit of philosophy come in, a little bit of kind of grounding in what's going on in the real world, that gives a sense of importance to the type of work that we do in these kinds of hackathons and conferences. Today, I'm speaking, I guess, with a little bit of both hats on. I'm speaking from a bit of a kind of highly personal place because of kind of the condition or the place that the tech industry at large occupies in the world today, and given the level of kind of conflict that's happening and the way that much of the tech industry has been, aligning itself behind some of the more authoritarian political tendencies. And that, for me personally, has been somewhat of a wake-up call to understand, how can we really ground what we're doing in something that is more pro-human rights, and steer things in a slightly different direction. So the talk today, actually, let me do a little bit more of an introduction just so you understand where I'm coming from. As part of the NIM team, I have the pleasure of serving across 3 different teams. One is focused on the operators of the network. So if by any chance this talk kind of inspires you to get more deeply involved in NIM, we have our lead operator tech guy at the back there, Sarinko, so please do take a hold of him during or after the talk. I'm also part of the community and marketing team. And then also part of the R&D team. And my role is really mainly to kind of unblock the genius of my team members, which is kind of my nice way of saying that I'm a manager in my day-to-day life, for better or worse. And I really try and kind of support my team members in really getting the most out of them and unblock them and make sure priorities are clear and so on. So that's what I do at NIM. In this talk, I actually wanted to beta test a little bit some of the more kind of like social science leaning work that I'm doing, which underpins a lot of the thinking that I have and the motivation that I have in my work at NIM, and also influences some of our comms and how we position ourselves more broadly. So I'm beta testing a particular kind of concept or lens on the role of privacy technology today. Through this term that I'm playing around with, or kind of tasting in my mouth, I suppose, called unwitting participation. So it's a term that I developed with a legal scholar called Dina Lupine. She's based out of the UK. She's done a lot of very, very interesting critical work around the role of participation, especially in legal processes, and how participation can be kind of co-opted in different ways. And I was giving a talk at this time in a kind of cultural context around digital networks and the types of participation happening in digital networks. And she was very interested, and we started to develop a little bit kind of this concept of unwitting participation that I would like to kind of throw out there in the room today and see how it's kind of landing with everyone in the audience. So yeah, it's let's get into it a little bit more. So if we kind of start with the first word, unwitting, it's kind of a word that we arrived at to try and describe a little bit the state of mind that happens when people are when you're engaging with your phone. You're kind of, you pick up your phone. Why do you pick up your phone? Many times we actually do it without even thinking. There is a certain kind of mindlessness to the activity. And even in the moments where we pick up our phone with a specific practical intent in mind, aka we want to message someone, we want to find something, check the news, look at maps or something, within seconds we find ourselves, scrolling random content feeds. So there's something around kind of that, I suppose, kind of mindless activity that we wanted to capture with this word unwitting, to try and figure out what's going on, what is the state of mind that arises in people when we kind of enter into that engagement with digital platforms. Now, of course, then there's also the topic of participation, the second word, participation. So what do we mean by participation here, especially in combination with unwitting? It is that, regardless of whether you pick up your phone and go online to deliberately engage in, some highly intelligent discourse, and you've got something you want to post, or, something kind of concrete that you're trying to contribute to the public realm on a social media platform, or, in a kind of group chat, or, some kind of financial activity that you're doing, and so on and so forth. Regardless of whether it's that type of, let's say, highly conscious activity, or whether it's something that you're doing, very mindlessly, like consuming media without even thinking about it, going through the kind of down the brain rot direction, there is nevertheless a form of participation that you're engaging in that sits beneath and below either of those two. And that's what we're trying to capture with this concept of unwitting participation. And what I mean by that is the data traces that you leave behind, right? And those data traces, here we're talking about, actual kind of packets and kind of content data, but we're especially also talking about metadata. Sorry, hang on. Okay, still with me, yeah? We're especially also talking about metadata, which is, kind of almost the subconscious traces that we leave behind, the things that we don't even kind of particularly consider. So the timing of the day, time of day when you're messaging your friend, the frequency that you're kind of messaging your friend, what device you're using, what media you're sending. These all leave a certain kind of fingerprint in the digital, realm, in the digital networks, that when they're picked up and analyzed, they give very, very fine-grained information about what kind of a person you are, how social you are, what kind of relationships you have with other people, and so on and so forth. So there's very, very fine-grained analysis that can be done at this level. So it's a form of kind of participation in a public realm, which is to say a digital realm that sits beneath the kind of conscious realm that, we normally kind of think of when we think of posting things online or doing things, digitally. So, and of course, if we look at the kind of entire loop of what's going on, we're there, we're engaging with our phone, there's these traces, they go out into the network, right? That behavioral data can then be captured by a variety of different entities, ISPs, data brokers, and so on. They enter into real-time bidding markets. They're then sold, as predictions to commercial and state actors, and they're then used for targeting, sorting, scoring, and other forms of surveillance. And that feeds into, first of all, a kind of commercial sector, and I think a lot of us at this point in time are fairly familiar with this concept that the internet is based on a surveillance business model, and this has been a big kind of discussion for quite some time now, but the mood and the stakes have kind of shifted, right? This is no longer just about a kind of commercial exploitation of data markets. It's now also moved very, very quickly into, military action, and really, the killings of civilians and breach of fundamental human rights. So that's to say that kind of we have this unwitting participation that operates on the one hand on an extremely subtle, very, very kind of intimate level of, if you look at the kind of history of the surveillance-based business model, there's been such fine-grained, let's say, kind of improvements on, interfaces and so on and so forth that make these kind of engaging highly addictive, right? So it kind of operates at a deeper kind of psychological level, playing on our desires, playing on our fears, playing on insecurities. Everything to kind of try and meet these basic business key performance indicators of achieving a certain level of engagement, keeping people on the app, and so on and so forth. So what's happening here with this, or what we're trying to capture with this concept, is you've got on the one hand this very kind of intimate sphere of you in relation to your phone, doing various things, either consciously or most of the time a bit mindlessly, and it's engaging your, a certain level of your subjectivity, a certain level of your brain, a certain level of kind of the unconscious, in order to kind of keep you kind of, captured by this engagement, which at the same time is a form of participation into a huge infrastructure. that actually is directly connected to, military action elsewhere, and harm is being done to others elsewhere. So this is the kind of idea behind this concept, and it's also, for me, what's interesting here is it's also kind of pointing towards a different way that, like, let's say, the kind of digital platforms of big tech today are, might be considered anti-democratic, right? So this is, again, something that is like fairly, big in kind of public conversation, that like, okay, big tech has got too big, it's anti-democratic. Why is it anti-democratic? It's because it, huge concentrations of capital, huge power in the hands of a few kind of CEOs in the United States to decide, the future of kind of development pipelines and where, capital should be allocated or not. But I think there's, again, this more subtle way that the kind of tech platforms that we've inherited are anti-democratic, which is exactly that it's shifting the modality through which we engage in the world from kind of these more kind of like conscious, perhaps even slower, physical realms into these kind of like highly marketized, KPI-driven sorting mechanisms that literally determine what it is that people are seeing and when, that determines a lot of kind of behavior and relationships between people. So almost the glue with which society is tied together has shifted out of the institutions that we might normally have associated with, the institutions that set the kind of the rules of society, aka political institutions, economic institutions, and so on, into a kind of technical algorithmic space that, so far anyway, is determined by business KPIs of big tech, which is a real shame, right? Because we're talking about the glue that holds us together. So there's definitely an opportunity there to look at kind of how can those more algorithmic methods be made more kind of interesting at a political level in terms of governance and so on. So this is kind of, like I said, this is a kind of beta testing of this concept. I've been trying out a little bit kind of testing for myself, like how I, consider that to kind of play out, let's say. So, up here on the kind of top left, we've got this, this idea of kind of like, okay, there's the conscious self, the socialized self, let's say a kind of political subjectivity that feels like almost a Cartesian individual. It's like, I am in control of my own mind. I decide who, I engage with and when, and I have a certain kind of self-sovereign or understanding of a kind of self-sovereign persona, which might be mobilized as a subjectivity when I decide to post something, right? It's like, I'm going to now contribute to the public sphere, or when I go out and decide to kind of vote for something. And nevertheless, my argument is that even though you have that self-conception, the reality of the technical stack that you're using does not care. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, there is an unwitting participation in an algorithmic formation of society that's completely out of your control, and that's based on business KPIs rather than any other kind of interests. Then you have this kind of semi-subconscious behavior. This is more like the subjective self. This is the kind of thing where it's like, oh, you're scrolling through your feed, and then, oh, you see a cute picture that you like. Before you know, you've hearted it or shared it with some other person. There's a reel that you're watching. You find it really funny. You've shared it with another person that you've already shared 1,000 reels with. This kind of more, loose, let's say, scrolling, clicking, liking. It's the kind of thing that happens when, we might have some uneasy feeling inside, and we want to kind of escape a little bit from that. We're bored, we're waiting for the bus, And again, there is this unwitting participation into an algorithmic infrastructure that is actively sorting content, categorizing people, setting up kind of targeting and profiling algorithms that potentially go on to harm others elsewhere. And then I've been trying to kind of like test, okay, what else is there in terms of, subjectivities? And when I say subjectivity here, I don't know how familiar that word is for people in the room. It's, the intention really is to not say that some people are good and doing things the right way and other people are not. It's like we all inhabit these different ways. It's more that there's different parts of ourselves, different parts of our minds that are mobilized under certain conditions. So yeah, I've been playing around with like, what is this? What is like the alternative? What is a different kind of subjectivity that might come about through a kind of, how can we move from this unwitting participation towards a more conscious co-creation or more conscious participation? it's a bit loose, a bit hand-wavy. I'm not going to go into depth with that right now. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about this relationship between that intimate engagement that happens when we're on our phones, to the larger structural tyrannies that are currently being, enacted in and through algorithmic systems. So I am mostly based out of London, and I run a series of discussions there at an institute called IBRAS in central London on technology and power. And last month we had an ex-Google employee join us to talk a little bit about his journey to become an ex-Google employee. And when he was at Google a few years ago, this was in 2024, and the genocide started in Gaza, he suddenly realized that Google had this project Nimbus, which was effectively, it's a collaboration with Google and Amazon working with the Israeli defense forces to enable kind of cloud and AI services. And there were reports that were coming out that the IDF were using a system called Lavender and a system called Where's Daddy, which is an algorithmic targeting system that effectively kind of generates profiles and then sets targets for drone strikes. So the Lavender kind of AI system, what happened in the first kind of period of time of the genocide, they started tweaking with the parameters of what constitutes or what counts as a Hamas operative, and they lowered the kind of probabilities for what is considered a Hamas operative, which then resulted in a generation, it generated like 57,000 targets for like 1 week, and the kind of kill rate was very, very high. And that was combined with a system called Where's Daddy, which is effectively a kind of geolocation algorithm that finds these Hamas targets that have been surfaced by the Lavender system when they are in their homes, because it's then considered easier to have a successful strike, which meant that entire families were being wiped out. So when he kind of saw that Google was involved in facilitating these operations, and not just involved in the sense of kind of like you develop some software, you sell it on to someone, and then it's being used and whatever it's done, but no, actively involved in maintaining live systems. He kind of, had a bit of a wake-up call and ended up, quitting his job. And there's been a kind of huge mobilization amongst Google employees in the past few years against Project Nimbus, and more recently also DeepMind have unionized in order to start speaking out against the leadership at Google for the complicity in war. And I think there's another moment earlier this year, of course, in February, when the United States and Israel used Claude to target the girls' school that killed, some 150 people, 120 of them were very young children. And again, it's like that same feeling where you get a kind of strange sensation when you realize that literally the software platforms that you're using in your everyday life also have this other use that's happening right here, right now, in real time. So, this kind of, for me, was like also a moment of like, okay, there is an unwitting participation also happening among software developers and software engineers, in jobs where it's like, yeah, you're just doing a tech job. But what this ex-Google employee was arguing was, you can't just kind of be doing a tech job in these positions. You actually have to start to understand yourself as an active participant in the battlefield, and then decide what you're gonna do about it. So yeah, it made me think back to this work, The Moral Character of Cryptographic Work, which was published as a kind of key piece in cryptography. It's also a very, very good piece by Philip Brogaway. Highly recommend it. And I can see that I have very little time left, so I'm going to go quickly on to architectures of freedom. So a little bit, I suppose what I've been trying to kind of do with this concept of unwitting participation is to also highlight the fact that when we're talking about surveillance systems, we're not talking about an individual problem, we're talking about mass surveillance. And mass surveillance means that what I'm doing online has a direct effect on others elsewhere because it's feeding into systems that surface targets on the basis of what is considered normal behavior or not. Your profile is kind of pinging against other people's profiles. So there's a certain kind of like collective nature to the problem of mass surveillance and the way that that is being kind of like supercharged right now, not just commercial purposes, but now for military purposes that have, direct effects on people's lives. So, from my perspective, the reason why I'm, working at NIM is partially also because there is something that's very incredible about the collective nature of how we're trying to solve that problem, which is to say that, mass surveillance can only be defeated by mass privacy. And so, the system that we're developing is something called a noise-generating mixnet. And what we do is we scramble packets as they move across the network. So there's a lot more detail that I would love to go into about that. But effectively, data packets are encrypted in, what's called Sphinx encryption that makes all the packets look identical. We have cover traffic that then makes it very, very hard for anyone to detect the metadata of traffic as it traverses the network. So it's kind of a blockade into that, that loop that we were discussing earlier. And effectively, your traffic, as you're using the NIM network, acts as cover traffic for everyone else, right? So we're seeing this kind of like lovely multiplier effect, though. So the more people using the network, the less cover traffic is needed, the faster the network is, and the better protection is offered to everyone else. So, we've got, over the past couple of years, NIM has been primarily, you can access it through a VPN application. And we've seen kind of uptake in all of these different, critical areas. And the VPN is, kind of available for people to use. It's intended for general public. But more and more, along the lines of kind of like trying to achieve this more collective approach, really we need something that moves from the application layer to the network layer, so that privacy is no longer a consumer choice, but is actually considered a fundamental human right and a fundamental kind of design aspect of our core infrastructures. So that's what we're working on now, is really kind of to dip down to that network layer. And, we've got some wonderful recent integrations with Edge Wallet and Zingo, and a lot more kind of lined up. So, I think I can see you standing up, wanting to kick me off the stage. So I think I'll wrap up there. But if anyone has any comments afterwards, especially around whether this concept of unwitting participation kind of lands for you or is sparking kind of any new avenues of thinking, please do come up to me afterwards. Or if you want to discuss anything more about the technicalities of NIM, also speak to me afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jaya. Yeah. This is very important work, so much appreciated. Thanks for sharing the insights. Good stuff. I hope all of you already installed the NIM VPN right now on your devices. I think, protect yourself to protect others. Pretty cool things. Next up, we have Alexander Traut-Guik, which I already had the pleasure to talk to in front of the conference. He's doing some really amazing work. He's a research fellow at the Vienna University.